I'm Linda May of Linda May Properties, and I want to welcome you to this incredible English estate. We're in Beverly Hills on Tower Grove. We're asking $49,950,000. Today, we are sitting down with Christine London, the renowned landscape architect who designed this incredible property. I'm so excited. Please come join me. So Christine, it is so lovely to meet you and have you here with us. You're such a big part of what the whole property is about. I'd love to know a little bit about yourself and how you became a landscape designer.
Well, I think that for me this is a case of the profession finding me rather than me finding it. But when I think back to the way I grew up in England in a rural town, and it was a small town, so most of what there was to do was outside and exploring outside, and so my memories are of being in the garden or exploring the countryside. My father was an industrial designer, and my mother was a very keen gardener with a green thumb. So I think both of those things eventually sort of came together. And I was living in New York in the most urban of environments at the time, but I walked into some nurseries that were out in Long Island and simply realized that this is where I want to be and this is what I want to be surrounded by.
It makes perfect sense, because when you think about England, you think of gardens, and people love gardening in general, so I think it's probably that we found each other.
I think initially it was really to understand the house and to respond to the Tudor architecture, and also the land. And so it's a lot of walking and hiking, exploring and spending time on different parts of a hillside 3-acre property to really see what the opportunities were. But I think my response to this house was that it was built in 1932 and the gardens had sort of grown up around it. So it was a house that turned inside, and what we wanted to do was really open it up and turn it to the outside terraces and the land and this amazing climate that we have, and really connect it to its garden spaces.
Well, one of the things you just mentioned, you were hiking, because what's unique about the property, or that I think makes it very special, is that there's slopes, there's this beautiful great lawn, there's so many different aspects to it. So I can imagine from what you're saying now that you went up and down and hiked and saw all the different opportunities to create, what is here.
We did. We wanted, so my client is a garden lover. She has a very keen understanding of good gardens and beautiful trees and a healthy garden, and she has a respect for the land. So our goals were to push the property out and to create flat, usable spaces such as the Great Lawn, but we didn't want to push out so far that we couldn't clad the walls with vines and greens and put staircase and paths through the property, so it really felt it sat gently on the land. It didn't really manipulate this hilltop,
right,
to the point where you could see what had been done. So we wanted both the comfort of throwing the living room doors open, or the kitchen or the library, to terraces that wrapped the property, so that there was just an immediate flow to the outside. And then on a piece of land like this, there's a natural diversity to the area. So some are south-facing slopes, the west slope is where the tennis court is, and the east slope is sort of shade gardens. And
So
a
that's
hiking
interesting
path.
right there, that all of that, which I think that most people don't really think about, how critical that is to you, your work, and the placement of these different parts that you put together.
Mm-hmm. So we worked a lot with the light conditions. So the rose garden, that's a really nice collection
It's
of
incredible.
primarily David Austin roses, so they're very fragrant.
Yeah, it's very
and
special.
they're colors that work beautifully cut and brought inside. So that's a south-facing slope, so that we get a lot of bloom and blossom and rebloom. The herb garden and the orchard are up on also the same south-facing slope,
Right.
because they want to sort of take in as much the sunlight.
Yes.
And then we wanted sort of some dapple shade areas, such as the pergola that
Right.
we're
We're sitting here.
beneath.
But what about the conservatory?
So the conservatory actually is built where the land previously dropped off. Up a slope that sort of terminated about where the conservatory is. So we had the concept of using the retaining wall as the back of the conservatory, and then sort of building the glass structure out from there, and then the guest house and there's an octagonal space that sits between the guest house and the conservatory that were all built out. So there was no land there previously.
That's very interesting.
On the lawn there was only a little peninsula of land.
Well, the
that wasn't
Great
really-
Lawn is really quite amazing, and then you did a very exquisite pool house and pavilion for sitting.
So,
Tell us about that.
So the pool house, so we framed the lawn so that the house, it really held the house.
Yes.
And so we have a large rectangular lawn with a path that wraps it, and then it drops down to a very sunny area, so the pool is always in sunlight.
Yes.
And then Ferguson Shamami, the architects, also were really involved in all of the architecture and the details. It's a total joy to have such a client, and it's a privilege. And we really both brought our ideas to the conversation. I think our first stop was to go to our libraries, and we would both arrive with stacks of books and pages marked, and lay everything out and look through them, and then we would edit our favorite ideas or organize certain concepts that belonged to particular areas. And that was the beginning of the kind of design conversation, and that went on through all phases of the project. So a lot of walking, a lot of research, a lot of visual images that we both bought, and a shared love.
So Christine, tell me, what are your favorite parts of the garden?
Well, I think that my favorite areas of this garden change according to the seasons, because we wove in a very strong seasonal element. So there's spring blossom, summer bloom, and autumn color, even in a California garden. So I think arriving at the motor court, what I love about that area is that we treat a motor court area, which is generally for cars and arrival, as a garden space. So all of the front rooms of the house look out into a garden space. We were able to group a collection of antiquities that was gathered over many years and many auctions. And so our favorite planters and vessels and urns are also grouped at the front door and then reappear in various garden areas. So I think the appointing of the garden was really a key element in being able to bring the inside out.
Yes.
So I love the detail.
Mm-hmm.
In the late summer, there are 4 white crepe myrtle trees around the pool area, and they're covered in a white blossom. At the end of the summer, that turns to a kind of brilliant autumn color, but that area with the pool and the really beautiful pavilion pool house and those crepe myrtle trees is really stunning.
I love just thinking about how it's evolved, well, because of course it's fall right now, and we've been here during late summer and have seen those changes, and it is really beautiful.
I like the silver garden, which is a gravel garden, and where we really used entirely silver foliages, and that always looks very refreshing even in the heat of the California summer. And then on the hillsides, one of the things we did was really protect some of the heritage trees that were here. So when we built very carefully and bridged over certain trees to protect their root systems. So we have, for example, a giant avocado that sits outside of the office, and another sort of irreplaceable Chinese elm that drapes over the Russell Gate staircase. So I love that we were able to not only save these trees from the garden that was in its first iteration, but we were able to sort of build around and feature them.
I love that. And what you started with about, I'm very much into a sense of arrival, and your attention, your discussion right now about how you made that such a focal point, the sense of arrival to this house. And it really comes across that way. It emerges as you come up that.
We wanted gravel because it just slows the cars down, and there's that gentle sound of cars arriving. And we also just determined that the driveway would be a garden as well. So if you're walking the property, then walking along the driveway and cutting down through the slopes is as beautiful as walking in the middle of the yes.
Well, let's go see some of those spots right now.
Okay. This is one of my favorite areas. It's a little shade garden that we built around this figurative
which is so beautiful.
statuary. She's very pretty.
She's very pretty.
And it's filled with oak hydrangeas for blossom and jasmine for the bloom and fragrance. It's just a lovely little shady seating area on the hillside pathways.
It's always been one of my most favorite spots when I'm walking around the garden. So I'm loving hearing how it was created. So thank you so much, Christine, for coming and telling us about the gardens and sharing the parts of this beautiful estate that are very special to you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it very much as well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.